Back.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And for those who are watching in other time zone, like the leader whom I'm gonna interview today, good morning. And for those who's gonna watch this later on, good evening, or probably those who are watching from New Zealand. And it's great that we're live, so people can actually see us, watch us, from everywhere you are in the world. And my name is Marilyn. I'm the founder and CEO of Customized Training Solutions Private Limited, or CTS. And we are passionate about helping leaders and organizations who are continuous learners and action takers to be able to transform and thrive in all five P's by co creating customized programs with our world class resources. We have served over 3,000 leaders from 30 plus countries in different industries, including Petronas, Sony, ProLife UK, Ayala Group, Chevron, Tencent, Jollibee Foods Corporation, and Shell, to name a few. Experts says that the pandemic will last in the next for the next 4 to 5 years, and this is why we are organizing several interventions, including this interview, to help leaders who don't know how to stay relevant and adapt in the new normal, those who actually find it stressful to lead and ensure performance of a remote team, and for those of you or leaders who are actually afraid that they can't keep their team or business. So to be able to stay relevant and continue to lead effectively in any situation, of course, you always have to grow. You always have to equip yourself and have learn and continuously improve, right? So, and today it's my great pleasure to have Bill Spindloe. We actually had him in our summit previously, Transforming and Thriving Together, in February, and he was amazing with his presentation about digital transformation and leadership. And just to introduce him before I bring him in, he's an experienced HR, training operations manager, or training operations manager, possessing a broad range of international experience in the oil and gas industry for the training sector, with expertise in the operational delivery and project management of large scale competency based technical training, operational readiness, operational excellence projects, and training centers. So, William or Bill is the author of the book The Learning Link, as well as a frequent speaker at industry events addressing key challenges like operational excellence, leadership development, assessing capability, continuous improvement, and measuring impact learning. Without so much further ado, I'd like to bring in Bill. Hi, Bill. How are
Hi, how you
you?
doing? I'm good, thank you.
That's good to hear. Um, we have like a reaction from Abdu here. Hi to you, and I'm glad you're watching us today. So we'll jump in right away to the interview. So the first
Sure.
question, I actually have about 8 questions for you. And then the first 3 questions is more about, understanding like from which perspective are you actually coming from, and then the 4 to 6 questions are like the most important part, I would say, where we will get a lot of nuggets or the meaty part from you. And the
Great.
last 2 questions will be my Miss Universe questions for you. So yeah, let's jump in. The first question is actually, we would like to understand from which perspective you're coming from, mainly in terms of your experience in the leadership, like who are your influencers, what are your favorite leadership style perhaps, and as well as your experience on leadership.
Yeah, sure. I think some of the some of the leadership influences are generally for a lot of people fairly close to home.
Mhm.
So you find that there are maybe it's the first boss, or it could be somebody in your family or something like that that has really exhibited the kinds of leadership um, that kind of makes you want to be them, when you're younger. And and then as you start to sort of gravitate the way through your career, then it could be clients and speakers, and there's been a few throughout the years that I've seen who've people I've worked with, and I guess in the kind of the arena of leadership, people like Marshall Goldsmith tend to speak in very pragmatic terms about leadership, which I like. Tom Peters similarly is someone who I very much enjoy listening to, and I think it's the pragmatism that they've employed in their discussions that really kind of has attracted me to the messages that they're trying to get across. I think sometimes we complicate things too much, and I think some of the best leaders out there are the ones who just keep things simple. Oh, your sound's gone there, Marilyn.
I forgot to unmute myself. I seem to have, hearing like an echo. I don't know why. So anyway, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I love what you've said about, leaders has to, keep it simple. And to share and to summarize it again, the best leaders, like what you've said, has been, inclusive where possible and brought people along with them. And that's, an excellent leader, I would say, because you're able to bring in people, together, inclusive. And nowadays, I mean, we've been hearing a lot of about diversity and inclusions as well, right? So because it's very important that inclusivity, or like your people to feel that they belong in the organization, right?
Yeah, I think we've hit a kind of we hit a low watermark in some respects back in the mid '90s when it came to leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had this kind of image of a leader being this kind of this, generally speaking, a man. Whenever anyone thought of a leader, if you had a picture in your head, it was a man. It was never a woman. And we had a picture of that man generally being, certainly in my head anyway, he tended to be sort of an older guy, maybe actually looking like I do now, actually, which is unfortunate. An older guy, kind of in a suit, maybe smoking a cigar, somebody kind of leading from the front, making the decisions for everyone else in the organization. And so we've had this kind of image of what leadership is for quite a long time. And the time we got to that sort of mid-late '90s, where it really started to peter out, we then started to pick up the pieces of exactly what leadership should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're now starting to, I don't think we've hit anything like the high watermark yet, but I think we are starting to see at least small glimpses of what good leadership should be in organizations. So, and certainly one part of it, as you mentioned, there is about bringing people along. And it's about including people and making sure that they feel actually part of the decision-making process.
Exactly. And that brings me to my next question on what is leadership for you then?
Sorry?
What is leadership for you?
Well, leadership has changed over the years. So leadership back in the sort of the old days, and and I've spoken to my father about this not that long ago. And leadership back then, when he was starting work, was generally speaking, a guy would sort of gravitate his way through the organization. So he would almost come in, like think of it like the factory. He would come in working at the factory floor, maybe sweeping the factory floor, and then move his way all the way through the organization and hopefully one day become that factory manager. Unless, of course, he was the son of the people who owned the factory. But leadership these days has changed significantly. Leaders don't need to know every single part of the organization. Leaders don't need to be an expert in every single part of the organization. What leaders need to be are enablers. They need to be the person who can listen to that subject matter expert, to that person who ultimately knows way more than they do about that particular area, and to remove the challenges for them, to help smooth the path for them, to help provide the resources for them, to basically help them succeed. So that leader, the leader these days, doesn't necessarily need to be or have great knowledge in any one particular area. What he or she does need to have, however, is the ability to communicate effectively and to to understand and to help and really kind of remove some of those roadblocks, which ultimately get in the way and cause frustration. And, obviously then we lose productivity, and ultimately we can end up losing people as well. So that's really what a leader is for me these days. It's somebody who collaborates, communicates, and ultimately, like I say, removes the barriers that prevent success.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So you've mentioned leadership is also a primarily about motivation, mainly on the collaboration and communications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. And that nowadays we've been hearing like what you've mentioned also that we're moving into a new phase where people would like to call it new normal or next normal. So how would you actually define or describe the next normal?
Yeah, the next normal is something that the McKinsey group came up with, and it's really just kind of um, starting to put some detail around what a lot of people have been talking about, especially since the beginning of the pandemic. But to be honest with you, this next normal really predates the pandemic. The pandemic has become that catalyst which has really, propelled the thinking a lot more quickly, and it's allowed people to be slightly more, or have to be slightly more dynamic in their thinking. So it's starting to look at. Initially, it was looking at, well, where do we need to physically be as people? Do we need to occupy buildings in various cities around the world? So that was generally the beginning of this, and the pandemic obviously proved that we can be anywhere in the world. We can use communication tools such as the one we're using right now. We can speak to people, and the job still gets done. And actually, we're eliminating a lot of the other factors which really detract from people's days, such as the travel and things like that, and actually also some of the costs, and obviously the business related costs as well. So there was a lot of talk about that sort of thing, but because of that, it's not just good enough to set up a home office for people and put and give everyone access to Zoom. That's not entirely what this is about. It's also then saying, well, look, if our employees are in this situation, then our customers are similarly in this situation. Therefore, we need to provide an environment, a digital environment, where we can start to engage with our clients remotely as well, so they don't necessarily have to visit us either. We're also seeing it in sectors which, and obviously I'm sort of, as I'm talking there, I'm almost alluding to service sectors, sort of retail sector. But when we get into places like the oil and gas sector, they're also looking to start to employ digital technologies as well, to start to look at extend the life cycle of the assets they have as well, fully realizing that, they really need to start to deliver better performance, better results, reduce costs. So all of these aspects are really part of the next normal, whether you happen to be a retailer who really needs to start moving things online, or you're a service provider in some particular way, or you happen to be running a refinery. There is a move in the next normal to look at some of the challenges that we faced prior to the pandemic, some of the challenges that the pandemic has very definitely illustrated some of the inherent risks and weaknesses in the business. And it's really started to propel some of the decision making, which in a lot of companies was a little bit flat. And I think a lot of leaders were kind of holding off to see how things were going. And now they don't have a choice.
True, true. No more choice. I mean, up until now, I mean, if people or leaders are still hoping that everything will be better or will be back to normal, then they're really doomed, right? And I'm glad that you've shared about like the next normal will be about a lot to do with utilization of technology to manage people virtually, a great deal more, and that's what we've been doing right now, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, there's obviously been a lot of it going on. I've run a series of workshops and seminars and things during the pandemic. A lot of the consulting work that I've been engaged in has been remote. We've had to find new ways to engage with people. Face to face ultimately is always better. However, it then becomes the case of, what can we do if we can't have face to face, and how can we make it better? How can we break down some of the barriers? How can we make sure that we still have that level of understanding? How can we make sure that our clients still see that level of commitment from us? Um, all of those things are absolutely key to any engagement that we have, with the clients, with our own people. So we're now starting to see how the brighter and the best minds in our business are starting to infuse some of those, digital technologies in order to help all of that happen. Obviously companies like Amazon were at the forefront of this, but we're now starting to see this spread across lots of different verticals. And off the shelf, kind of ERP type purchases are now starting to not necessarily become a complete thing of the past, but people are starting to think more carefully about, what they actually need to buy. And it's, so I think if you're running a digital company right now, you've probably received a lot of inquiries from leadership.
True. And I remembered in our previous summit where, for your specifically for your day, which is on digital transformation, that a lot of the speakers, including you, made mention like how critical it is in terms of the role of the leaders as well as of the people to have a successful digital transformation. And actually that leads me to the next question. What is the top problems when it comes to leadership and leading in the new normal?
There's a myriad of things, and leadership itself, the clarity of the message, the clarity of the vision, the strategic planning process. You know, uh, I can't name any names, but in the very recent past, I've been through this with a number of clients who very definitely have a top line vision of the kind of thing they want to achieve, but they don't know how to go any further into details in order to get there. So the strategic planning process, something like 77% of all digital plans, projects fail. Um, and they fail for a myriad of different reasons. There's never just one thing, but there are a number of things. So leadership, the planning itself, and also, we're starting to see real issues with companies adapting to change. The communication of change, understanding what you need to communicate, when you need to communicate it, how you need to communicate it, how robustly you need to communicate it, the feedback that you need to engage, how best you can measure how successfully you've been during that process. These are all factors that, and part of the issue that a lot of companies go through is that when people mean when they say change management, it means different things to different people. And then if you had 20 people in a room and I say, well, what was change management? I would get 20 different answers. And that's the problem. So all of us need to be, if we're going to make any project work successfully, we need to be on the same page. Everyone needs to understand exactly what their roles are, what their accountabilities are, how they need to perform in order to make this a successful project. And all of these things ultimately do come down to leadership, which is obviously the key factor here. But then there's a myriad of other things, as I've mentioned, which can affect all of this all the way along. And 77% is not a good percentage. So we really need to start to improve that.
I love that you've mentioned about the communications part. In fact, in the previous summit as well that we've run, we've um actually have like one day just about communications, how you can communicate it effectively, when you should communicate it, and all those stuff. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And again, like what you've mentioned, the problems, it doesn't take only one thing, right? It takes quite a number of things to be able to get there. And like, yeah, like what you've said and highlighted in the problems, which I've summarized here in the screen, is that, effective planning, change management, and of course, developing the talent, right? So sometimes some leaders miss out in terms of developing talents, right?
Well, they
This
do
is
it,
like
and the
the most,
first
I would say.
one of the reasons they miss out on these things is the first step to solving a problem is to
Mm-hmm.
admitting that you have a problem, and a lot of what I'm seeing consistently over the last 30 something years since I've been in business is an unwillingness to admit there's a problem, because then connected to that admission that there's a problem, a lot of people then seem to think that then there's going to be um, fingers pointed to say, well, who's to blame for this problem? Well, very often I find that it's never just one particular person, or it's never just
True.
one particular thing. There's lots and lots of things as to why problems occur. The important thing is that we recognize there is an issue and there is a problem, because without actually admitting that, we can't move forward. And when it comes to things like talent management, until we actually, look at where we are, where we want to be, and what is stopping us getting there, then, and quite a lot of the time that's talent,
Mm-hmm.
then we'll never be able to make it any further forward. So these are definitely key concerns.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love the part where you said the importance of the key is the talent in terms of, addressing these problems. And of course, it always boils down to awareness. And I guess for some leaders, it's more of getting rid of their ego, right? Because this actually, I mean, you've made mention earlier, like, they don't get to accept that there's a problem, or they don't get to acknowledge that, there is actually a problem that they have to solve, right? Having said that, so
Part of the issues are um, if you break down leadership competencies,
mhm,
you'll see that something in the region of about 40% of a leadership competency involves mentoring and coaching, and basically bringing on new talent in the organization. So if that talent doesn't exist for whatever reason, then the leadership really only have one place to look. Um, and I find that when I've spoken to leaders and I've been involved in coaching with leaders, and I've mentioned to them that in some regards, for about 40% of your competencies do relate to bringing on other people, the
mhm,
first thing you get is, really, as much as 40%? And the answer is yes, because it's about that enablement. As you're starting to engage with people, you can take an opportunity as you're engaging to remove some of those barriers and blocks that I mentioned before, to
mhm,
eliminate some of the risks. And you use that opportunity to engage with that person to hopefully then bring them up a level,
mhm.
so that they also have a better understanding of some of the organizational challenges that you face, in order that there's a better understanding going forward. So you take every opportunity as a leader you can to try and coach and mentor and bring people on. So it should inherit every single part of your discussions with people.
Amazing. So that actually leads us to the next question. I mean, we're getting a lot of nuggets from you, and I thank you for that. And we're still in the middle of the discussion. And so that leads me to the next question. What are the important leadership capabilities or skills you must have in the next normal to be able to continue to lead effectively?
There's a lot of them. Self-awareness is a big one. Um, you know, Being aware of what you know and what you don't know, or at least accepting that there's a whole load of things you don't know, is
Mhm,
extremely important. Um, and if you do that, it will drive you to want to speak to other people, to gain perspective and knowledge and understanding that you may not possess. And that involves getting out of your office. So that's
mhm,
really comes to the next part of it, which is then collaboration,
mhm,
that communication. And if you are a leader who doesn't possess the best communication, it's like a muscle. It's something you have to exercise. It's something you have to work.
true.
I don't know many people that were born great communicators. They've become great communicators because of the people around them and the influences that they've shared. So if you are one of those leaders who doesn't necessarily possess the greatest communication skills. Put yourself with people who do. Get yourself involved with people in the organization who very definitely have those skills, and also use the organization itself to help you communicate. So those would be, like I say, self-awareness and communication would be very definitely two areas as a leader that I would look to work on. And then, from a technical perspective as well, just to try and gain a better understanding of your business as a whole. Looking at your competitors, the industry. So there's an educational function that needs to come into play here as well, which I guess is kind of linked to self-awareness in some ways, but it goes really beyond that. So it is about the best leaders I know are the ones who are consistently reading, going to events, talking to people, and really just taking the opportunity to find ways to learn. And a lot of that really just comes down to engaging with the world in general. So those for me would be the top three traits that a leader really should possess. And of course, there's a myriad of things underneath that that they need, from a technical perspective to run the business. But just from a sort of behavioral and personal standpoint, then those would be the top things that I would be looking for.
Thank you. And I remembered actually, like, there are moments where when I actually have discussion with clients and they would made mention like, oh, we have that training or we had this training and yet it didn't work. But again, like what you mentioned earlier, it's like building a muscle, right? You cannot build a muscle in one day, right? It has
No,
to be a continuous effort that you have to take, and that's the reason why, like you've mentioned, one of the most important leadership skills is continuous learning as well, right? And to be able to continuously improve as well, and build that muscle, it's a journey that we have to take. We can't just like have a one day training and that's it. Right?
well, I mean, there's a big mistake that organizations have made over the years where they hit a certain roadblock or challenge, and let's take, for example, suddenly you received, suddenly your sales have dipped, and you may have also received a load of letters from your clients saying we don't like your service levels anymore. So that client pressure then drives you to say, you know what we need to do? We need to train everyone, and they then throw everyone into a training class and they teach them about better sales and better customer service. And then everyone comes out and then they're told, okay, you've now been trained, you should be able to do this better. And that might not be the problem. Training may not be the issue. There could be a myriad of different things that can be getting in the way of this. It could be product related. It could be the approach of the organization. There's just a whole range of issues. But everyone seems to believe that training is this panacea. And they also seem to believe that throwing people into a classroom and then hoping for the best is, it seems to be it. You need to be a lot more scientific on this. And it is a journey, as you say. It's not just about that one event. That one training event may well contribute to the overall story, but it's not the story. So, the rest of it could be also getting involved in workshops, getting involved in sessions with other people in your industry on a regular basis, discuss some problems and challenges. It could be what we used to call the breakfast club, which is Monday morning meetings where everyone got together, with some breakfast in front of them, and you had a topic of the day. And over breakfast, people would discuss this and discuss some of the challenges and open up about the things that were concerning them. So, these are all learning events, and they start to build that muscle that you are going to need going forward. And what happens when you stop exercising is your muscles basically go back to the way they were. So this needs to be a constant form of exercise going forward. You can't ever just say, okay, I think we're done. Great, we've trained everyone. Great, now everyone should be able to give us the sales that we want and the customer service we want. It doesn't work that way.
Yes, very true. And that's the reason why I love what you mentioned earlier, that, it's about building the muscle, and it doesn't consist of just one thing, or it's just part of the story, like what you mentioned, right? Because and that's the reason why from being focused on just training, we were actually moving towards consulting, because even though we're actually creating results after results, and that's the reason why a lot of our clients are referral or repeat business, right? But because we have that training, like this training, that training, and it doesn't really integrate much as compared when you do consulting, where like what you mentioned, there will be several interventions like the morning breakfast or discussion, learning intervention, coaching, mentorship. And I believe it's something that would, integrate all of those, because the challenge is that, okay, you have the knowledge already through the training, but how can you actually implement this? And that's where a lot of companies or even leaders do fall, in terms of like, oh, okay, so I know this, but then will I implement it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And
I've been working with a client just recently, and he's a very senior man in the organization,
mhm,
and he has a significant amount of responsibility. Um, he's not the kind of person who is very willing to openly admit
mhm,
everything that he doesn't know.
mhm,
Um, he doesn't want the training class. He hasn't. He's self. He always says himself that he doesn't have time for it, which is always one of those terrible excuses that people say. But he just doesn't. He says he doesn't have time. What is actually critical for him is not sitting in a very broad-based training class, which paints with a broad brush, but it's actually getting to the heart of the issues that really concern him. So it's
true.
having someone sitting in front of him for a number of sessions over a number of weeks where we can really start to get to the kernel of the truth of the issue for him, and then start to work on that,
Mhm,
so that he can then start to develop his own muscles. This is really what it's about. I could send him to a training class, but I don't know what good it would do. There may be some seminars and things that he could take, which certainly will be of some interest for him going forward. But generally speaking, what he needs is something much more targeted, which really starts to get to the heart of where some of his challenges and problems lie. And I
mhm.
think many of the leadership, many people in leadership that I deal with and I coach, are in exactly the same position.
Thank you for sharing that story. So to reinforce what you have just said, and that leads me to my next question. What do you believe is the role of learning, leadership, and transformation in thriving in the next normal?
I think that um, because a lot of organizations, London, for example, are looking at considerably less office spaces these days.
Mm-hmm.
They've had something like 900,000 people who have actually just moved out of the city, who've decided to change their life and actually move out of London. So, and a lot of cities around the world are sort of doing exactly the same thing. So we won't be coming together quite so regularly. So what is important is we look to make sure that we fully embrace the opportunity when we do come together in any respect.
Mm-hmm.
So, whether it's in an environment like this, or whether it's one of those sort of maybe sort of rare occasions when we do actually come together for, various meetings or whatever, that we take the opportunity to really start to weave into our working life, the development of the people that work with us and for us. So you're going to start to see, and 70-20-10 was something that 10, 15 years ago everyone was talking about, and it was as a methodology. The numbers don't necessarily stack up. However, the method itself has some resonance, and especially today, because we're then starting to talk about how do we start to infuse learning and development into every aspect, and so that it's not just the purview of the HR and training department. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone in a leadership role, everyone in a management role is going to have or should have much more of a responsibility to drive the development of the people underneath them. So having those Monday morning sessions, having those little coaching sessions, developing leaders and managers who on the job can grab someone and say, hey, come and see me at lunchtime. I'd like to have a chat with you. I want to get some ideas flowing, or come and have a chat with me. I think I might be able to help you. These are things that we need to do on the fly. These are things that we need managers to do on the fly, and that they need to be cognizant that they need to do it when they see it, and not leave it, because they'll forget about it and it will go away and it will never get dealt with. So we need to develop a whole set of new managers and leaders who effectively become an arm of the training department, who need to create that awareness within the organization, and who ultimately need to exhibit leadership, right? Whether they
Correct.
are actual leaders or not, like leaders with a big L, they need to exhibit leadership with a small L. So you can be a just a guy working on the shop floor, but if you see someone do something incorrectly or in a way that may well harm them, it's incumbent upon you to show leadership and go to that guy and say, "Hey, look, I don't want you to hurt yourself. Look, this is the way that let me show you how you should do this so that you can, you get out of here alive today." Right? And those are ways of exhibiting leadership and infusing learning and development into the workforce. So this needs to start at the top, and then it needs to permeate its way all the way down throughout the organization, so that people feel that part of their job is to help to engage with their fellow employees. So for me, that's what it's going to be about going forward.
Thank you for sharing with us, and it's really helpful. I mean, I think that's where a lot of leaders are really missing out, understanding the importance of learning and, like, bringing that through as a journey within the organization, right? And before I move to the next question, I actually just want to acknowledge Salim and Bandela. Salim says, "Well done, thank you so much." And Bandela is asking, "What is this? This is a live." It's a live interview between me, I'm Marilyn, and Bill. You can find it in the description as well. This is about leadership and transformation. So that leads me to my next question, which is, like I've mentioned, my Miss Universe questions. Um, if you have a magic wand and can use it, what will you do with it?
Sorry, could you just repeat that one for me, Marilyn?
If you have a magic wand and can use it, what will you do with it?
Well, this answer for me probably changes on a daily basis, and I think it changes for everyone, um, because I think that there are, we see different things on a daily basis, which kind of make us think, "Oh, I just wish I could change this." And so for me this week, my magic wand would be to have everyone admit openly and freely all of the things that trouble them, and all of the things that they might consider to be weaknesses or challenges. This is my magic one moment this week. Last week it would have been something different, and the week before it was something different. But this week, it's really all about that admission, getting people to stand up and actually go, "You know what? I don't know. I don't know the answer, and I need help. Who can help me?" That would be mine. Here's the reason why. It comes down to what I said originally about, in order to fully embrace a problem and solve the problem, you have to admit that there's a problem in the first place.
Mhm.
And that's true about all of us. And I think a lot of people are shy when it comes to admitting things. I think they're maybe trepidatious or scared about admitting things. So my magic wand would be to take away that fear from people, to say, "You know what? Life will be so much better for you if you actually just put your hand up and say, I've got no idea what you're saying, and I'd really like you to help me out here," rather than saying, "Yeah, sure, I get that. That's no problem," and then walking away and not fully understanding it and causing a problem later on. So my magic wand would be to take away all the fears and trepidations that people possess, so that they can just express themselves and tell us what they're feeling about the things they need help with.
Thank you for sharing that. It's amazing. I hope you have a magic wand, but I believe, like, through training, through consulting, you can actually do that. And it's probably like more true for leaders, I would say, especially if you're already at the top, like, when you feel like, oh, okay, people are expecting I'm good at everything and all those stuff. Gone are gone are the days where that is true, like, or when you should feel that you know everything. I think people will appreciate you more if you were able to, like, be vulnerable enough, or as what you've said, admit that you don't know everything, and if you need help, then so be it, right?
Well, the worst. I mean, there's a small story which is attached to this in that I was involved with an engagement with a client many years ago where we had proposed or recommended a course of action they should take in terms of the development of learning and development and the use of technology in order to help
Mhm.
them manage and to measure the return that on their investment. And it really received a very kind of lukewarm response in the room. Not the first time I've received a lukewarm response from my recommendations, um, but it did. And I thought, well, you win some, you lose some. This was really just one of those things that I just walked away. However, 2 years later, I bumped into one of the board members who I was talking to, and he asked me if I remembered the presentation I'd given, and I said, yeah. And he said that they were now just looking at implementing the measures that I'd actually proposed back then. And I said, it's taken you a couple of years to think about this? And they said, no. They said the issue was that none of us wanted to admit in the room that we actually didn't fully understand some of the terms you were using and he said, even though you asked us and said like, do you know what I mean when I mean this? Or do you know, everyone just nodded their head and said, yes. So you naturally went ahead under the assumption that we understood. And as much as you do in try and check knowledge and understanding as you're going forward with these things, you do have to ultimately rely on that person to tell you the truth. And he actually admitted, he said, you know what? He said we need to do a lot more critical analysis of our own abilities, our own levels of knowledge and understanding. He said, otherwise this business is just going to fall to pieces. And this was his words. And I thought it was great that he was able to admit that. And again, it comes down to the ethos that if you have a problem, then the best way to tackle it is by admitting what the problem is. So that's just a little story that kind of illustrates the point, really.
Thank you. I'm glad you shared that story. And so this leads me to my last question, which is, if you were to ask yourself a question that you can best answer, what would it be?
Oh wow. Again, I think this probably is something that changes maybe on a weekly basis with me. I would. There's a number of different questions, but I would look to ask myself is how equipped and ready am I for the next 5 years? I'm looking at, and I think everyone needs to have that moment where they stop and because as we're all charging through our lives, and you know what, training and development people are the worst people for this. We go out there training and consulting and coaching and teaching everyone else. And at the same time, you would kind of like to hope that we're also keeping our levels of skill levels up there as well. And there's always a great adage that, I certainly learn from my clients as well as learn, it's like, yeah, I know you learn from your clients. However, you do still need to keep yourself sharp too. It's like the plumber who has the leaky tap at home. He's out there fixing everyone else's leaky taps, but the most leaky taps in the neighborhood are the ones in his house. And we need to be cognizant of that as well. And I at the moment, I'm at that point where I'm looking at that next normal. I'm looking at the next stages in my my engagements with clients, and I want to make sure that I'm up to the task. And so I need to understand where my weaknesses are, and I fully need to understand how best I can, advise, provide value, and really understand what that's going to look like for me and also for the clients in the next 5 years. So that would probably be the question I'd be asking right now.
Wow, that's a great question. And I too would always ask this question, always, thinking of how can I equip myself? How can I be ready to serve my customers? How can I add value to others? It's always the questions I would definitely ask myself. And thank you for sharing that with us. So, before we actually end this interview, is there anything more that you'd like to add or invite our audience with?
No, I mean, I guess the thing to do is, I think these sorts of interviews can be extremely helpful. Not just for not just for anyone watching, but actually for the people who are being interviewed as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you're starting to get these questions, it makes you start to rationalize your thoughts. It makes you start to think about how best you can articulate some of these ideas,
True.
and it starts to really kind of throw some new things into the mix. So I think everyone benefits from having these kinds of discussions, and I think it really does come down to this is obviously a public forum, but there's no reason why people can't do this in their own organizations as well.
True.
I've run one last week on strategic thinking, and I interviewed someone in our organization who had been working with me on a strategic planning process for the last 8 weeks. So the discussion that we put across the airwaves for everyone in the company
Mhm.
was really to illustrate some of the challenges that we had going along the way, some of the new learning that had happened along the way, but really just to illustrate that this is an iterative process. Everyone goes through the same thing, but it was a valuable exercise, and that if our experience can help anyone along the way, then we're here to do that. So I think all of these kind of sessions can do that, and I think it would be helpful for I would certainly advise people within their own organizations to run these
Mhm.
sort of discussions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this very insightful and very invaluable interview with you, Bill. And of course, thank you everyone for watching this. And even though those who will be watching this on a replay. So do join us in this journey to fight the pandemic that caused these challenges and turning it into opportunities, because through these several interventions that we've been doing, interview, masterminds, master classes, and other interventions, that would help you to be able to actually lead effectively and stay relevant, because of course there's no choice but to adapt on these changes that is happening right now. And so remember that even the richest investors in this world would say that investing in yourself is the best investment you can ever make in your life. So thank you so much for those who watch us and invested in yourself. And with that, we would like to leave you with this quote from Dolly Parton: if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you for our audience for watching. I hope you've learned so much. And bye for now. Stay safe, everyone.